Historia has not been an active major participant in the narrative since she became queen. She didn't go with the scouts to Shinganshina because it was too dangerous, and in the current arc she's been out of action due to her mysterious pregnancy. But Historia hasn't only been disconnected from the action all this time, she's been disconnected from the story as well. Historia, her pregnancy, and her understanding of the current situation have all been kept purposefully mysterious. We don't know who the father is, we don't know what she knows about Eren and his plan, and we don't know who she supports in this recent near-civil war that's been going on Paradis. Everything about Historia is currently mysterious. Every chapter that passes by, we speculate if this is finally the one we get some information about Historia, but continuously Isayama opts to show us a different piece of the puzzle, letting us down. This is intentional. The longer Isayama makes us wait, the more important he is telling us she is to the ending. The fact that he's obfuscated from giving any information about her even this late into the game means that he must have something monumental planned for her and her mysteries. There has to be some grand twist regarding everything to do with Historia that would ruin the plot if it was revealed any earlier. But what the fuck could this be? Obviously, the biggest mystery surrounding Historia is who the father of her baby is. People want to know this even more than they want any Historia characterization or Historia's opinion on everything that's currently going on. Two things that might actually be far more substantive. Now, to me, there are still only two options of who the father is: the random farmer guy and Eren. Nearly a half a year after my Jaeger Master Plan video, still, these are the two only fathomable options in my opinion. Most people are not in favor of the random farmer guy option, even though from a thematic standpoint I think it's great. Historia, after being convinced that becoming pregnant is what is best for Paradis because it guarantees Zeke's safety and whatever, decides that instead of fulfilling the audience's bullshit shipping fantasies with Eren or Reiner, finds a partner special to herself and no one else. Someone, as it is explained, that used to pick on her as a child but silently sought redemption by working on the farm at the royal orphanage she owned. She viewed what he did as admirable and chose him since he appealed to her. This theory establishes Historia taking power into her own hands in a situation she was largely powerless in, and makes a decision for herself, and one that is more in line with the Historia we came to know in the Uprising arc, irrelevant to what the audience or anyone around her wants. But honestly, the twist being that there was no twist and that Isayama had already explained who the father was isn't very likely. Outside of something truly monumental that I would like to remind you isn't impossible, Isayama is Isayama. He could be saving his best twist for last. But outside of something monumental, Eren is the most likely candidate. As much as I'd like to come screaming to you that I had cracked the code and found all the secret foreshadowing that the child was Levi's, I can't. My take is the milquetoast one. Eren is the father. But the code that maybe I think I've cracked is the maybe even more interesting question about Eren's motivations, and how that relates to him being the father. Since there has to be a bigger twist hidden in here somewhere, otherwise Isayama wouldn't have allowed this much anticipation to build, and delayed the answer until the ongoing climax of the entire series. Eren's motivations since the time skip were an aspect of the story very similar to the question regarding who the father of Historia's child is. For a long time we were left in the dark, intentionally so to build up anticipation that Isayama could later pay off in a big twist. When we see Eren for the first time post-time skip, he's acting completely out of character and erratic. He's ruthless and violent, killing political enemies with no hesitation as well as innocent people and children. The Eren we once knew was gone, but we understood that an explanation for all that change was coming. Isayama had to no longer write the series with Eren as the main character, because if we got any internal insight into him, it'd ruin the surprise immediately that Isayama's goal with creating Eren's character was to always have him be the final villain. Now I know some of you are still holding on to the Eren is the good boy who did nothing wrong theory, but by the actions of our contemporary characters and his depiction of Eren's followers in chapter 126, Isayama seems to disagree with you. Now that doesn't mean anything, the author is dead, but the intended interpretation of Eren's character arc almost certainly is that he was the tragic hero who became the villain, when pushed too far by the cruelness of the world. Eren seems to have revealed through his speech at the end of chapter 123 that he intends to destroy the world in a childish and foolish attempt to save the people of Paradis, because he views them as his people. Now this explanation actually fits into all the incarnations of Eren's character and basically demonstrates that as the world of Attack on Titan has been revealed to Eren to get more complicated. He has stayed the same in his view of it, while the other characters have developed to readjust to the changing world around them, but Eren has stayed in the us versus them mentality. Eren still views things the same way he fundamentally did in Chapter 1. The people of the walls are under attack and he needs to protect them. This all seems to check out. Even if his plan is logically flawed, it is rather childish, which Eren has always been and continues to be. This plan fits with Eren's character perfectly. Just think back to the ocean scene and how unnuanced and childish he acts there. He points at the rest of the world and tries to reason that if they kill everyone beyond the sea, then they would be free. Think of how reductionist and simplistic that statement is. And I think that's where the melancholic beauty of that scene originally came from, but I viewed it more as Isayama showing us a moment of weak childishness in Eren that in time he would outgrow and would calm down and understand that it's a bit more complicated than that. But look at him now. He's literally activated the rumbling and is unironically trying to kill everyone across the ocean, thinking that that's the actual solution to all of his problems. But I think even more than his childish ploy to save the world, there might be an extra tragic layer of motivation here for Eren that fuses both the final two biggest mysteries in Attack on Titan into one. I think Eren, while doing all of this for the reason he himself stated, might primarily be doing all of this for Historia, therefore making Eren's motivation and the mystery behind Historia's baby daddy one and the same. Welcome to what I affectionately call the Eren is a simp theory. But all joking aside, wouldn't it tie everything together if Eren was in love with Historia and wanted to create a world he deemed right for his unborn child? Eren is destroying the world not only for these grandiose reasons to fix a cycle of hatred that's becoming of the last 2,000 years, but mostly for his family. And I think not only is this a far more understandable and relatable motivation, but it's a far more interesting one as well. Now I'm expecting some pushback here where some people won't understand how this could possibly be a plausible motivation for everything Eren has done, and that Eren is totally too determined in his principles to let this be his motivation. But just think about all your other favorite anime and manga. They are all quintessentially motivated by the girl. Think about Jet's final question to Spike. Was it for the girl? Think of Guts' seemingly eternal struggle to chase the shadow of Casca's sanity. Think about Shinji's reaction after seeing what the Ava units have done to Oscar. Yes, it was all for the girl. Everything will always be for the girl. So yes, Eren, if he did love Historia, would do all of this for her. Because what else is more human than fighting for the people that you love, even if the whole world is against you? But the implication in all of this and all of those examples is that they also were doing it for themselves. Spike is dealing with self-pity now that Julie is dead. Guts only felt happiness that once and wants it back, and Shinji wants to try again with Asuka. And Eren wants to do all this to justify the entire fight up until this point through the rumbling. Because what was he fighting for if not his people? And his people can't just be the general populace. It has to be something more personal to him, because personal motivations are far more relatable, so he's doing all of this for his family. Now this doesn't mean I think this will justify what Eren has done. He's still undisputably a terrible person and the villain of the series, but this only makes his spiral into madness more relatable and tragic, because it has to be understandable. That's the point. We must understand both sides. We must understand that a human put in that position would reasonably act in this way. Eren must be human, so he's a reflection of ourselves for whatever theme Isayama wants to portray. Just think about Eren's motivation. He wants to save his people, the people of Paradis. Now imagine that being said by Historia. It'd make a lot more sense. She's the monarch of the Paradisian people. They are her people, and she should seek to protect her people to be a good queen. Therefore, her and Eren's motivations seemingly overlap seamlessly, so I don't think it's too much of a stretch for her to be on his side. And if she was on his side, then that would make Eren, her possible husband, the king of the Eldian Empire. And boy, would Eren proclaiming himself king be a hell of a way to end an upcoming chapter. Also, then it would literally be his duty to protect and serve the interests of the people of Paradis, only further justifying in his mind all the atrocities he's committed. That's largely my theory. Eren's secret motivation that we've been speculating about for years is that he fell in love and is about to have a child and wants to protect them and engineer a world right for them, which also answers definitively who the father of Historia's child is. This would also explain why Historia is so depressed in every shot we have seen of her being pregnant. She knows Eren is not only killing everyone not currently on this single single island, he's also putting himself in abject danger while not being around her, in her own time of struggle. Everything seems to make sense with my theory, but as with all theory crafting in Attack on Titan, I'm sure I'll be proven wrong in due time. But before we end the video, I think I must explain some of the foreshadowing that Isayama loves to sprinkle into his story to retroactively thrill us as we go back through the series. So I'd like to point out the foreshadowing of Historia and Eren getting together. Chapter 107 is the most key piece of evidence that foreshadows an eventual Historia and Eren relationship. They were always quite close throughout the series, especially in the Uprising arc, and they had clear shipping moments where Eren made Historia blush at times, most notably when he said that he hated the Crystal Lens character and prefers the Historia version of her much more than the person she was pretending to be. But chapter 107 is the chapter where we find out Historia is pregnant. This happens at the end of the chapter, but a majority of the pages in the chapter are used to show a flashback meeting between Paradis and Kiyomi discussing the early stages of Zeke's plan, where it is proposed that Historia needs to have as many kids as possible for the betterment of Eldia, for complicated reasons we're all aware of. But here what's most interesting and important to the point we're making here is that even though Historia initially agrees, Eren stands up in protest and says that any plan that requires Historia to carry an unwanted pregnancy is one he cannot be in favor of. Historia viewed this as her duty to help her people, but clearly didn't want to go through with it, as evidenced here when Eren relieves her of this pressure and she nearly breaks down crying. Now, is this just Eren sticking up for one of his friends, or could this be dualistically motivated by him wanting her? Well, that depends on whether or not he's really the father or not. Eren clearly highly values Historia here, as he is literally putting her ahead of a supposed plan that will save the world. In some ways, this scene is portraying what the theory is here, saying that Eren values Historia over the safety of the world. But there's also some irony in this chapter regarding an eventual Historia and Eren relationship, since in the early pages of chapter 107, Historia is pretty clearly shipping Eren and Mikasa, when she brings up how cute it is that Mikasa only ever showed Eren the mark on her wrist. This becomes hilariously tragic when you realize the implication of the chapter is that Historia totally stole her man. There are also multiple foreboding shots of Hanji seemingly noticing Eren's fascination with Historia. Isayama also loves to bookend his chapters with the same plotline, as we have all been reminded recently, and chapter 107 starts with Eren and ends with the shot of Historia pregnant. Chapter 107 seems to be implying this connection. So not only does this theory fit the contemporary and possible future actions of Eren and Historia, but it also works into Isayama's obsession with ironic retroactive foreshadowing. Now that wraps up the theory and all the evidence I have for it. There are of course other ideas I have floating around in my head about all this. They're just not as well put together and thought out. Historia could very literally just be a lesbian and not bisexual, meaning that any sexual contact with a male would be repulsive to her. But evidently, she has been sexually active with a male, and this could be why she's depressed. She understood getting pregnant was compulsory, so she forced herself through it, for the betterment of her people. Or we can continue going down this rabbit hole as I speculated in my Jägermaster plan video that Eren could have forced himself on her. Not only would that explain her depression and all the pregnant panels we've seen of her, but it would also quadruple down on the Eren being the bad guy theme. I don't think there would be many people defending him then, though Griffith Did Nothing Wrong was the original incarnation of that meme. If Eren can justify genocide on an unprecedented scale to achieve his goal, could he justify forcing himself on one woman even if it was one of his friends? It doesn't seem impossible. But Attack on Titan isn't Berserk, and I seriously don't think Isayama has any interest in sex as a topic to be explored in his manga, let alone rape. But the only thing I know for certain is that the baby is ironically going to be named Ymir, referencing the original Ymir ironically, even though she'll actually be named after Historia's lover. And that's the sort of ironic melancholy and allusion to grandeur that Isayama lives on. But that's all I have. Hopefully both the Jaegerists and the Mikasa and Eren shippers don't come after me like I expect they will after this video. The Jaegerists will have flipped out when I sarcastically called Eren a simp, and the Eren x Mikasa people will get mad for obvious reasons. But tell me the detail that I completely forgot that disproves this theory in the comments below, as well as generally giving me your thoughts on everything I've said here. Patreon is the best way to support my work, though subscribing helps too, as we near back to the 600 subscriber mark we had on the old channel. Follow me on Twitter as well for micro takes and to be updated when we are streaming live on Twitch. We do media analysis over there, and that's probably the best way to discuss or argue about anything from this video. Anyway, support links in the description below. Thanks.